Hi, my name is Ray Cruzy and I'm from the ISU Extension Outreach Office of Dubuque County, and today we're going to talk about 3 different types of tomato trellising systems that you can try in your own garden, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of each. So the first system that we're going to talk about is the single leader system, and what that is we're going to train this individual tomato plant all the way up this individual stake, and we're going to prune off all the additional branches that are on here and select one individual branch, or the single leader that goes all the way up through this plant. So here, how we're going to prune this plant is if we start at the base here, we see the individual central stem, and then it comes up here and forks off right here, and you can see the individual leaf, the main stem, and then here's an auxiliary branch. And what we're going to do is we're going to just take that individual little auxiliary branch off so that we have one individual stem with the leaf. And we'll continue that process all the way up the stem of the tomato. So here is another one. Now, I will say, here you can see the leaf, here you can see the central leader stem, and this is the auxiliary stem. This one here is a little bit large. So in this case here, what we'll use is we will use a pruners, and we will come in and knock that off. And there we have, continuing our central leader system here. So as we continue going up, we have another one here that's really small. We'll pull that out and discard that. And then here we have, again, the central leader coming up. We have our leaf, our main leaf here. We have this auxiliary stem, and then we have the central leader, and we're going to knock that off. And we're just going to continue that process as this tomato grows. Now the question is what do we do with it? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of string. I have a piece of just baler twine here. You can get it very cheaply from the store, and just tie it very loosely to the stake. The key is to tie it loosely because the width of your tomato stem is going to get larger in time, and you don't want to choke your tomato off. So there you have it. We have effectively tied that up, and you also might want to, some of your tomato stakes might have little notches on them, so you might want to hook it on there so that they don't fall down. You can also use other materials to tie in your tomatoes too. This is a garden tie that you can get at the garden store or the garden center. They're flexible, coated in rubber or plastic or foam, and again, you just take them and very loosely wrap it around the stake and the tomato. And there you have it. You have your tomato trained to that stake. Now the advantages of this system here is that you get more airflow around the tomato so that you can hopefully have less disease, and the leaves dry out faster, resulting in less disease. It's a little bit easier maybe to spot individual insects and things like that because you have a certain amount of leaves. Also, you can pick your tomatoes a little easier because there's only one stem and they're pretty much attached right to this stake. At the major disadvantage of this is the materials. You know, you might need yourself some individual ties or string to tie them to the stake, and then also time, because you have to be on top of this process in order to have it work effectively and maintain that one single leader going all the way up the post. The next system that we're going to talk about is the cage system, and this is probably the most common system that gardeners practice in their gardens. And all it simply is you plant your tomato out in the garden, and as soon as it becomes a little flimsy or has the ability to flop over, you put a cage around it. And the cage's goal is to keep our tomato branches going upright so that it doesn't flop over when we get fruit and things like that on the branches of the tomato. Now, as your tomato grows up the cage, your job is to continually tuck in the individual branches as they grow out through the holes. You don't necessarily have to tie the tomato to the cage, but it is helpful to tie the cage to a stake so that it does not fall over in the wind. Now, pruning with this system isn't necessary. However, if you are concerned about airflow towards the base and trying to keep those leaves a little drier, sometimes it may be appropriate to prune at the base of the tomato. But commonly, most gardeners don't prune at the base, and it's not really necessary for this system to be successful. So another disadvantage of this system is that when we have a full-size plant growing inside this cage, sometimes we don't have the desired airflow to keep the leaves dry that's necessary to prevent disease. So you might see a little more disease in this system, but in the long run, this system does not require the same labor that the single leader system will have. The next system that we're going to talk about is the Florida basket weave, and what it involves is the use of a series of stakes and some twine that you can use to trellis your tomatoes to keep them off the ground so that you can pick your produce. So the first step in doing this process is you plant your tomatoes out in the garden, and when they get large enough to kind of flop over in the garden is when you install the stakes between each one of the tomatoes. Now optimally, our tomatoes are spaced in the garden about 3 feet apart for this process if we're doing indeterminates. Determinates can be spaced a little closer, but I've found that 3 feet apart is a good general spacing to have in the garden. Now once we have our stakes installed on either side of the tomatoes, what we'll do is we'll take our piece of twine here, and this is just a piece of baler twine. You can get it from a farm store for a really cheap price, and then you just simply tie it off at the end stake here. I'm going to do a square knot to tie it off. And we'll come along the bottom of the tomato about 6 inches off the ground, and we'll go to the next stake, and what we're going to do here is we're going to loop around that stake. So we're going to pull this tight, and we're going to go to the next tomato here, and we're going to go around the end stake here, and this is just simply a place that we just loop the string around that stake. Now, the back side is where things kind of get a little bit tricky. On the back side of the tomato here, we come back and sandwich the tomato between the two twines. So you can see that right there, and we come back to our stake. We loop around the top, and we come back to our next tomato here, sandwich it between those twines, and then we loop it around the top of the stake again. Now, these tomatoes here are at a stage that we can actually do 2 twines today, and we'll space them about 6 inches apart. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of, to avoid cutting a twine, what we're going to do here is we're going to go up about 6 inches. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to put this tomato here over that twine. We'll keep bringing this over. And what we'll do is we'll continue moving down the line here. And then we will loop our string right around the end post, and then come back on the back side of our tomato here and sandwich it all over again. And there's the next level, and there is the next level there. Now that we've reached the end, we don't really have a whole lot of extra foliage to tie up. So we'll just terminate this here today, and we'll wait a couple weeks until the tomatoes grow a little bit more. We'll tie this off here with a square knot. And there you have it, the Florida basket weave. And now with this system here, a person can try to increase the airflow around the base of the plants by pruning off some of the individual suckers at the base to try and get a little bit more airflow. So you can trim off a few branches at the base, and it doesn't matter whether they are determinate or indeterminate. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference at this stage which one of the extra runners you pull off at the base. But you can get a little bit more airflow around the base here. Now as the plant grows, you will in time have this plant sandwiched between all these individual twines. Airflow can be a problem, and disease can be more of a prevalent issue here than what it is with the single leader system, and sometimes even with just the cage system as well. But there you have it, some of the pros and cons of using the Florida basket weave in your very own garden at home.